Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to build a push notification system using Node.js and a module called Webpush. Now, in the past, you may have used push notifications in your programs using something like PubNub or Pusher or some other third-party service. But this Webpush module allows us to do that without using any of those third-party services. Now, it can get a little confusing, so I just want to talk a little bit about push notifications as well as service workers, because we do need service workers to use push notifications. So basically, a push notification, or in our case, is a web push notification. It's almost like a text message, and modern browsers can handle them using service workers. So the last few versions of Chrome, last few versions of Firefox. I don't believe Edge supports them yet. But you know, if you implement them on your site, it's just, you know, and someone opens your application or your website using Edge, it's just not going to show. So it's not like you're hurting anything by using them. Push notifications are great for capturing the user's attention for whatever reason. Maybe you have a sale on some kind of e-commerce site, or some kind of point of action where you really want to grab the user's attention. Now, just to show you what they look like, I'm sure most of you know, but if you don't, you can go to this test.peter.sh/notification generator. You can choose some different options here if you want, but I'm going to leave the defaults. I'm going to click display the notification. Now, you guys aren't going to see this on my screen because my entire screen isn't recorded, but I will show you an image of what that looks like. All right, so it should look something like this on a Mac. It'll be up in your right-hand top corner. If you're on Windows, it will probably be on the right bottom corner. All right, so basically it just has a title. It has, you can put some content in here. You can put an icon, and you can also add images. You can add like yes, no answers, buttons, things like that. But we're going to keep it simple and just do something like this. All right, so as far as service workers, they're kind of difficult to understand if you're just getting started with them. They're at the core of progressive web apps, if you have any experience with that. This is a really good article at developers.google.com, and this goes really into depth on service workers. But this here, this Medium article is a beginner's guide to service workers, and it's a little more understandable. So basically, a service worker is a JavaScript file that you add to your website. You can use it to do offline and background stuff, such as make your website display pages when offline or display push notifications. And then there's a list of stuff that they can do. So obviously, dealing with offline content, that's at the core of progressive web apps. And then right here, using push notifications, your website can send the user notifications even if it's open, or I'm sorry, even if it isn't open. You may have seen this on Mastodon, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So that's what we'll be doing, guys. This is another good article on push notifications, but it's kind of technical. This is the Google Docs again. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to open up VS Code, and I just have an empty folder called Node Push Notifications. And basically what we need to do is create a server-side script that's going to accept an endpoint. So we're going to have an endpoint with Express called subscribe. And then what we want to do is on the client side, we want to send a subscription object to the server, and then the server will trigger the service worker to show the notification. All right, and I'm going to do my best to explain the code, but this isn't something that I'm a complete expert in, so forgive me if there's, you know, I don't explain something you know, completely clearly, but I'll do my best. So let's go ahead and run npm init. Of course, you need Node.js installed. I'm going to add the -y flag so I don't have to answer any questions, and it's going to just create the package.json file with the defaults. Okay, next thing we want to do is create or install our dependencies. So we'll say npm install and we're going to want Webpush, we're going to want Express, and we're going to want body parser. Okay, we want body parser because we're actually sending, like I said, the subscription object from the client to the server in the body. So that's what we're using that for. All right, so now that those are installed, what I'm going to do is just add a start script here. So we'll get rid of test and we'll say start, And let's just get rid of this. And we'll just say node index.js and save this file, and that's it. All right, so next thing we want to do here is let's create our index.js file. And then we're going to bring in Express. Okay, we're going to bring in a couple more things as well. So we also want Webpush, so it'll be web-push. But here I'm just going to call it Webpush. And let's see, we want body parser. So that'll be require body-parser. And then we just want the path module, which is a core Node.js module, because we're just going to have to define the static path for our client side. All right, so now that we did that, let's go ahead and initialize Express. So we'll just say const app equals Express. And then what we need to do is create a set of Vapid keys. Vapid, I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced, but let's take a look at the Webpush docs or the GitHub page. So right here you can see we need to include our Vapid keys. There's actually a command that we can use to generate, which is this right here. This generate Vapid command, generate Vapid keys. So what we'll do is go into our terminal here, and I'm going to clear this out. And what we want to do is we need to access the location of Webpush before we can generate the keys. So it's going to be /node_modules/.bin/web-push, and then we can run the command. So we'll say generate, let's say generate-vapid keys. And there we go. So it gives us a public key and a private key. All right, now what we want to do is put these into variables. So we'll say const, say public vapid key, which will be a string, and private vapid key. And then what I'll do is just grab this. So I'll just go ahead and copy that and paste that in there. And then we want the private key, which is the shorter one. And we want to paste that in there. And if you're going to deploy this, I would suggest putting them in some kind of environment variable. So next thing we want to do is we want to run webpush.setVapidDetails. And this takes in three things. It's going to take in a mail to an email address. So we want to say mail to : and then some kind of email address. And then it takes in the public key and then the private key. All right, and I didn't even explain what these Vapid keys do. Basically, they identify who's sending the push notification. All right. Sorry for that banging if you guys can hear that. So next thing we want to do is create our subscribe route. Okay, so this is what we're going to send from the client. We're going to send to this route, and then this is going to be responsible for basically sending the notification to directly to the service worker. So it's going to be a post request. So we'll say app.post, and we're going to just call it subscribe. All right, and then we'll put an arrow function here. We'll say request response. And in here, what we want to do first is we want to get the push subscription object that we're going to send from the client. So let's say get push subscription object, and we can do that. We'll put it in a variable called subscription. So const subscription, and we're just going to get it from request.body. Okay, and that reminds me, one thing I forgot to do is add the body parser middleware. So up here, we're just going to say app.use, and we want to put in body parser.json like that. Okay, so now that we get the subscription object, what we want to do is send back a status. We're going to send a 201 status, which basically means that the resource was created successfully and everything's okay. So we'll say res.status 201, and then we'll just add JSON, and we'll pass in an empty JSON object. So that sends back a status. Next, we're going to create the payload. So we can attach a payload, which is completely optional, but what I'm going to do is put the title of the push notification as the payload. So let's say const payload equals, and we actually want to run this through JSON.stringify to make sure it's a JSON string. Oops. Okay, so it'll be an object with a title, and for the title we'll just say push test. So that's our payload. And then the last thing we want to do in this route is pass the object into the send notification function. So we do that by saying webpush.send notification. It's going to take in both the subscription and the payload. And then if there's an error, we can actually say synchronous, so we can say .catch error, and we'll console.log, or let's console.error, whatever that error is. And that's it. That's our route. So the last thing we want to do is obviously we need to be able to run our server. So I'm just going to create a port number here of 5000, and then let's do app.listen on that port. And then we'll just throw an arrow function in here, and we'll say console.log. Let's put some backticks, and we'll say server started on port, and then the port variable. All right, so that's our server. That should be it. That's really the easy part. So let's see if we can run this. We'll go down here, and we'll say npm start, and now it's running. Good. So now for the client side, actually there's one more thing we need to do in our server. We need to configure our static folder where we're going to put our client stuff. So let's do that right below where we created the app variable. And we'll just say set static path, and we do that with app.use. If you guys know Express, you know this, express.static. And we'll just pass in here the path.join method. And let's go ahead and do our current directory, so _dir name, and then we want a folder called client. Okay, that's what I'm going to call it. So we'll save that. Let's just restart the server real quick down here. All right, so now that's running. Now we're going to start on the client. So we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it client. And it has to be called client because that's what we called it right here. And by the way, if you notice things change when I save, like the single quotes, they turn into double quotes. It's because I'm using the prettier extension, and that's what it's configured to do, which I might change because I prefer single quotes. Anyways, let's go to client, and let's create a couple files here. So we want a file called index.html because we need something to actually load in the browser. We also want a JavaScript file called client.js. And then we want our service worker file, which is going to be called worker.js. And the service worker is going to be very little amount of code. So in the index.html, I'm just going to use Emmet to generate a boilerplate. And we're not really going to put anything here except we'll just put an H1 or something. But in the title, let's say push notifications using Node. And down here we'll put an H1, and we'll say the same thing. All right, so that's all we need here. We need to include the client file, the client.js. So we'll say script source, and let's say client.js, and that's it. So we'll save that. And now if we go to port 5000, we should see that page. So let's go HTTP localhost 5000. And there it is. All right, so this is the page where our notification should, once we're done, it should ask if we want to allow or not allow it. If we allow it, it should pop up. All right, so let's finish our scripts. So we'll go to client.js. Now in the client, we actually want the public key, that Vapid key, that public key. That's fine for anyone to see. It's the private key that you want to be really hidden on the server. So let's actually grab this. Okay, make sure it's the public one you're grabbing. And we'll paste that in here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check for service worker. We're going to check to see if we're able to use service workers in the current browser. So we'll just say if, and inside quotes here, we're going to say service worker in Navigator. Okay, Navigator is basically the API for the browser itself. So if that's true, then we're going to run a function that we're going to create called send. And if there's an error, we can actually do a .catch. Okay, everything's going to be asynchronous. We're also going to use Async Await, which I'll explain in a second. But right here, let's say if we get an error, then we're going to console.error that error. All right, so let's go down here and create that function. Now, like I said, we're using Async Await, and it's basically just a more elegant way to handle asynchronous code. Service workers are promise-based. We're also using the fetch API to communicate with the backend with that subscribe route, so we're going to use it there as well. Now, if you want to use await inside a function, you need to label that function async. Okay, so we'll just create a function just like you would any function, except we'll say async before. Okay, and we'll call it send. And this function is going to do a couple of things. It's going to register the service worker. Okay, you need to register your service workers. Then we're going to register our push. Okay, so we're using the browser's push API. And then we're going to send the push or send the notification. That's the three things that this function is going to be doing. Now, I want to kind of just log our steps along the way. So we're going to do a bunch of console logs just so you know exactly what's going on. So first we're going to just say registering service worker. So to do that, what we want to do is create a variable. I'm going to call it register, and we're going to set that to we're going to say await because this is asynchronous, and then navigator, so the Navigator API, and then service worker, and then register. Okay, so that's going to register it. And the worker that we're registering is going to be in that worker file. So we'll say /worker.js. All right, now we're going to put a second parameter in here, which is going to be an object. And we want to define a scope for this service worker. So you can actually define like different URLs where this worker is going to apply. For us, it's just going to be /. Okay, it's just going to be I guess the home page or the index. So after that, let's do a console log. And I know these console logs, they take up extra lines of code, but it's nice to know exactly what's going on. So, and we'll see that as it happens. Actually, here we'll just say service worker registered. Okay, so that will register the service worker. Actually, we should probably put a comment here. Okay, so once we do that, we want to register the push. So we'll go down here. Let's say register push. We'll do a quick console log. So what we'll do is create a variable now, and we're going to call this subscription. So this subscription is going to be set to, we're going to use await because this is asynchronous, and we're going to say register. So this is the variable we just created when we registered the service worker, and then it has a property called push manager. Okay, so we want to use that, and then we want to use a method called subscribe. So register push manager subscribe. Then we're going to pass in some options here. One is going to be user visible only, which we want to set to true. And then we want to set something called the application server key. Now, this is going to be our public Vapid key that we have above, but we need to actually convert it. And let me just show you in the documentation of Webpush. Let's see. So right here, you can see that they're setting the key, the Vapid public key, but they're wrapping it in this URL base64 to uint8 array. We have to pass it through that to change it to that format, which that function is actually on this page. Let me just search for it. We'll say uint. And let's see, yeah, right here. So this function, and it says when using Vapid keys in your web app, you'll need to convert the URL safe base64 string into a uint8 array to pass into the subscribe call. So basically, we just want to copy this function right here. So I'm going to grab that, and we'll go back to VS Code, and we're just going to put that underneath our send function. Okay, don't put it within it. Make sure you put it underneath it, and then we can simply wrap this inside of that function. Oops, like that. Okay, and just make sure you do that. Oops, we don't need that semicolon. All right, so that is our subscription. I think that's all we have to do here. So now what we can do is just we can console log, and let's just say push registered. Okay, so last thing we want to do is we want to send push notification. So to do that, we actually need to make our call. Let's actually put a console log in here first. So we'll just say sending push. And then what we need to do basically is send this subscription object to our back end. Okay, remember in our Node.js where we have our subscribe route, we're going to catch it right here. So it's going to come through the body into this variable, and then down here it's going to be passed into send notification, which will interact with the service worker. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to use fetch. I'm going to use await fetch, and the route that we want is /subscribe. Now we want to make a post request, so we have to add in a couple extra parameters here. So one is going to be the method, which is going to be post, and then we also want the body. Now the body, we're going to wrap this in JSON.stringify. Okay, so inside JSON.stringify, we'll pass in the subscription object, and then the last thing we want is just to add our headers. We want to let it know what kind of content this is, so we want content type, and the content type is going to be JSON, which is application/JSON. Okay, so that should make our request, and then after that, we can go ahead and console.log, and we'll say, let's just say push sent. Okay, and again, I know the console logs, they take up quite a bit of room here, but I just want to show everything, as it's happening. Maybe afterwards we can delete them. But that should be it for this file. So let's save. Now the last thing we need to do is actually create the service worker, which is going to be this worker.js file. And there's not a lot of code that we have to actually put in here. We basically just need to handle the push event. So again, I'm going to do a quick console log, and we're just going to say service worker loaded. And we're in a service worker, we're going to say self, which reflects the actual worker we're in, and then we want to call add event listener. Just like in vanilla JavaScript, we're just listening for an event, and we're listening for push. Okay, so we're listening for a push event. It's going to take in an event parameter, and in here we want to be able to get, remember that payload, and in the payload we had the title. So we're going to create a variable called data, and we can get this with that event parameter data, and it's going to be JSON. And then I'm just going to do another console.log here, and we'll say that the push has been received. So we'll say push received. I like to put my little ellipses here. And the last thing we need to do is just simply show our notification. We can do that by saying self.registration, and then we want to call show notification. Okay, and this is going to take in a title. Now the title is coming from the payload, and we can access that. And when I say the payload, I mean from the server. Remember, we put the title right here. We can now access that because we created this data variable. So we can simply say data.title, and then the second parameter is going to be a bunch of options. Now we're only using the body. We're going to use the body and the icon, but there's a lot of other stuff that you can add as well. So for the body, I'm just going to say notified by Traversy Media. And for the icon, I'm just going to grab a remote link to my logo, which you guys can use if you want, or you can put your own logo, but I'm just going to paste that in there. All right, and that should be it. So when the server, when we send our subscription object to subscribe on the server, it's going to send the notification, and then in the service worker, it's going to show that notification. Okay, so let's make sure that that's saved, make sure everything is saved, and let's just restart the server down here. So npm start, and let's go to our page, and we're going to reload. And okay, so I got the notification, but you guys will probably get something that asks you if you want to allow. I've already allowed notifications for this domain, so that's probably why I'm not getting it. But if you get it, just click allow, and then you should see the notification on the side. You know what? Let me just let me take a picture of it real quick. So I'm just going to reload so it shows again, and open up my little screenshot thing here. Take the picture, and there it is. So this is what it should look like. It says push test. That's our title. It has the domain, and then it has the body, the whatever you put in the body, notified by Traversy Media, and then it has the icon. All right, and it'll look a little different on Windows as well. It'll be down. It should be down in the corner, I think. Okay, so that's working. Now you guys will have to allow it because you probably haven't yet. So make sure you do, and then it should display. Now in Chrome, if we take a look at, let's open up our dev tools here, and you can see in the console everything that's happened. But if you go to application and then service workers, you'll actually see our current service worker. So worker.js gives you the date and time and all that, tells us that it's active and running. You can actually stop it, shows us the clients, and you can unregister it, you can update it. So there's a lot that goes into this whole thing, this whole service worker, and I'd suggest looking more into it if this is something that you're interested in. If you're interested in progressive web apps, you definitely want to check them out. I do plan on doing like a full crash course on service workers, but there's still quite a bit of reading up that I have to do in order to do that. All right, but I did want to do some kind of project that implements them, and also push notifications because it's something that's really cool. If you can offer that to your clients, you know, that's I guess push notifications have a 90% open rate, so they can be pretty powerful for like marketing and stuff like that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I will put this code up on GitHub, so that'll be in the description. I'm also going to put these links to these articles in the description if you want to learn more. And like I said, I will have a crash course coming out at some time. All right, so thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like. If you're not subscribed and you like this type of content, please consider subscribing, following me on social media, contributing to Patreon if that's something you're interested in, and thanks for watching.